Amy, never should I've done this evil deed. I shame to wear such filthy hands. And the unwatered radish. Hauled by the relentless torment, cry, rest no more. Crimson is the innocent slip. The unretort blessing, and stuck amen in my throat. A feared vagrant, wandering the sea of troubles. And hark! His heel devouring soul. Appalls me the pleasant sorrow and the disturbing quietness. I hurriedly felt the unknown future. Disdaining fortune, lookingly the innocent flower, but happened the serpent under it. I perceive the red blotched planets. Is this out of that stage? Uncheerfully did the unsown desire root. Well, this is the prologue of Macdonne, the tragedy that I've been working on for over a year, which is a sort of soliloquy of the main character, Macdonne, who expresses his feelings and his sense of regret or what is going to happen later on. I mean, this prologue is a sort of anticipation of the future episodes, so the future events that are happening later. The first thing to say is the fact that it is not an ordinary prologue. As you might know, the prologue always tends to be a sort of introduction of the play, whether we are dealing with a tragedy or with a comedy, regardless of the genre. But the prologue has always been accustomed to being the opening part of the work. But in this case, as you might have seen, it is a sonnet. It is something different from the ordinary. It is not an ordinary thing to see a prologue written in a sonnet form. And this is already a sort of anticipation of the fact that the character who's playing the part is a character who belongs to a high class. Why, you might wonder? Well, This sonnet is linked to the high society, to high class society, whilst the prose was the opposite. Texts written in prose underline the misery, the common social class of the character. Another essential thing to underline before going into detail is the fact that it is a soliloquy. The soliloquy is when there's just one character on the stage and there's no one else present in that moment, and he speaks on their own, talking implicitly to the public, to the audience, but the character is basically on their own, expressing their feelings, their emotions, and which is even the case of Macdonne. Now, let's have a better look at the prologue, at this sonnet which functions as prologue in the tragedy. The first thing that you might see is the fact that there's this exclamation, hey me, hey me, underlines his feelings. His desperation is desperate. Macdonne is desperate. Never should I have done. Never. Be careful to this never. It is not casually placed. It is the first word of the verse. Never should I have done. It doesn't say I should have never, but never should I have done. Never implicitly tells us that he is subject to regret. He is repenting. And the fact that the first word that he says is never is already a sort of anticipation of the fact that he's not so strong, so confident as you could have thought of at first. But then, never should I have done. Look at this have placed at the end of the verse. Have done. This have is crucial for the rest of the sonnet. This have is implicitly linked to the first word of the third verse, where you might already feel this soft assonance, have, were, but we'll have a better look at it later. And we might even say that since it is implicitly linked to the first word of the third verse, it is not a proper chiasmus, but it is an implicit one. This word refers to the first word of the third verse, but nonetheless, there's a verse in between the second verse which separates the two words. And when we start reading the second verse, have done, there's this word, done, which is, if you are careful, a powerful word. Done contains the O, the vowel O, which is a close sound. I've done. You might mark this element. On the other hand, we have, the previous have that we had in the first verse, which is much more sort of open sound when we read it. Have, we can feel this open sound, have, and done, on the contrary, is the opposite. And this done, which is a close sound, already suggests us that it can no longer have a change on what it did. Whilst have, which is a softer sound, is like a sort of hope to change the past. Have, but then there's done, which is a punch in the present, which is a punch to his final hopes to change what I've previously done. And then continuing reading, we see I've done this civil deed, this specific dietic, the civil deed. It is not a civil deed, but it is the civil deed, which is explicitly referring to the crime that he committed. And then this use of civil deed is interesting. Civil deed reminds us of the fourth verse of the prologue of Romeo and Juliet, which is where civil plot makes civil hands unclean. In addition to this, never and civil are both disyllabic. Ne, va, si, vo. But in both cases, the accent is on the first syllable. Ne, va, si, vo. And why am I underlining the importance of the accent? Well, if the accent was banally on the second or even on the third syllable, the sound was much more fluent, it was much softer, you know. Whilst ne, va, si, vo, it makes you concentrate on the word. I shame to wear such filthy hands. Look, it hasn't been said, I shame on wearing, but I shame to wear. This choice of the preposition is not made by chance. To wear is a rigid sound. When we read this part, is an harsh sound, whilst I shame on wearing is much more fluent. And now we arrived at this word, where, that I'd already previously anticipated. Where refers implicitly to the last word of the first verse. The use of where is vital to be underlined. In this verse, we've not been said that he has filthy hands, but that he wears filthy hands. I shame to wear. If it was I shame to have is different from to wear. To wear, to possess, but he possesses these filthy hands unwillingly, whilst to have is implies a way of saying that he has voluntarily filthy hands. And then going on, such filthy hands. Filthy hands is a reference to Shakespeare, more precisely to Macbeth, as some of you might have understood probably, and more precisely to the second scene of the second act, where Lady Macbeth tries to reassure her husband and tells him to wash his hands, to be clean, to clean his sins. I mean, this gesture of washing the hands is filthy hands since he committed the crime, and as a result his hands are not clean, and they are filthy, they are dirty, they are sign of the crime. And indeed, and the unwatered radish refers to the previous part of the verse. The unwatered radish. But why unwatered radish? What does this mean? Unwatered means that he's not able to wash his hands, or at least he can wash his hands, but he will never be able to remove the traces of the crime, the traces of the murder that he committed. And this reddish is a way of saying blood, the color red, the blood. Howled by the relentless torment cry. Well, you might think that there's a mistake here. Howled by. But it is not a mistake. It is made on purpose. It would have normally been like the relentless torment howled, but in this case, it is a passive. I'm howled by. And this howl is a noisy verb, noisy, which creates an atmosphere. Howled. Well, the first thing to say is that howled reminds us of the howl scream, which is always related to the second scene of second act of Macbeth. But even this verb howled, you see, this fluency, the word amplifies the sound. Howled by the relentless torment. There is this contrast. It is interesting. Am howled by the relentless torment, whereas howled is a fluent verb. This fluency is interrupted by the harsh sound of relentless torment cry. This alliteration, relentless torment cry. But even more banally, relentless torment, relentless finishes with the S, and the first letter of the following word is a T, and this st is already a contrasting sound, relentless torment. And more in detail, the accent has a remarkable importance on these two words. Relentless torment. The accent is on the first syllable of torment, which is still this idea of harshing, making it disturbing. And then rest no more. Crimson is the innocent slip. Crimson is basically red. There's always this idea of red, of blood. But even in this case, we have an inversion. We have crimson is the innocent slip rather than having the innocent slip is crimson. In order to underline and to prioritize the horror, the seriousness of the action that he made, the unreturned blessing and stuck amen in my throat. The unreturned blessing refers to the fact that Macdonne is not able to have blessing, to send the prayer back to the others, since he's a sinner, since he committed a sin. And there's always this reference to Macbeth, where Macbeth himself cannot say amen since he committed the crime. And the same thing is for Macdonne. Amen. Stuck in my throat. Stuck in my throat. There's another alliteration to make the sound harsher and more complex and more difficult to read. But it is not a case. It is always made on purpose, this choice of dental consonants. A fear vagrant, disyllabic, which is another disyllabic word. A feared. And the fact that a feared starts with an A introduces us of the prevalence of these A vowels which are going to be present in the verse. A feared vagrant. Wandering, this ing form continues the action. It makes the action fluent and it amplifies the sound itself. Wandering the sea of troubles. And hark! Another break, another punch in the verse. And hark! This exclamation. Well, arc in the past, arc means listen, but in this case, it's much more sort of way of expressing desperation and frustration. And hark is heal, devouring soul. And now appalls me the pleasant sorrow and the disturbing quietness. Let's have a glimpse into this part. Appalls me the pleasant sorrow and the disturbing quietness. See carefully that in this verse, most of the words are made by one syllable, or at best 2 syllables. Appalls me is composed by 1 syllable, the 1 syllable, and then pleasant sorrow and the disturbing quietness. It is not a case that the words which have the most quantity of syllables are the words that I want to concentrate on. Pleasant sorrow. They are made by 2 syllables each, and as a result we have a paresis, which means that 2 words which are associated with one another, they have both the same quantity of syllables, and in this case they both have 2 syllables. As a result we have a paresis. And the disturbing are 3 syllables, and quietness as 4. Why? You might think that quietness has three syllables, but if we break down the word, if we break down the structure of the word, this alliteration of T, this being qua e t ness, the T, the consonant T, isolates the word and the division of the syllables. Another interesting thing to underline is the use of the first verb, appalls me, since it isn't appall me, as it might have normally been, since there are two words and we have to use the plural form. But in this case, we have the singular one, appalls me, and then the pleasant sorrow and the disturbing quietness, which is an implicit way of saying that appalls me refers both to the pleasant sorrow and the disturbing quietness. It makes this distinction. Here we have a zeugma, which means that we have a verb used in the singular form to talk about two separate things. Appalls me, the pleasant sorrow, and then appalls me, the disturbing quietness. And here you are the reason why there is the use of this singular form to separate these two factors, to separate the pleasant sorrow from the disturbing quietness. And then I hardly felt the unknown future. I hardly, this adjective is not used by chance. It is not a casualty, and the same thing means for the unknown future. Unknown means imminent future, which is a reference to what Lady Macbeth said in the fifth scene of the first act, where she says, "This ignorant present, and I feel now the future in the instant." This then in fortune lookingly, another reference, lookingly the innocent flower, another reference of the same scene where always Lady Macbeth, it is always her who says, "Your tongue, you look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it," which is kind of similar somehow. Lookingly the innocent flower, but this conjunction, but happened, and even the use of happened is crucial, and happened the serpent under it, which is a way of saying that it didn't mean to be the serpent, but it happened, but it turned out to be the serpent. Now we are going to the end almost of this sonnet. I perceive the red blotched planets. I perceive the red blotched planets. Another alliteration. And this verb perceive tells us that what it sees is not real, it's just an illusion, but nonetheless it is something that it thinks that is true. I perceive the red blotched planets. But why red blotched planets? Well, they are sign, they are metaphor of blood, they are metaphor of the crime that he made by killing the king. And here are the reason why these planets are red blotched. Another essential thing, which is probably one of the most important ones, is the fact that I perceive the red blotched planets. And then there's the dot at the end of the verse. Indeed, this verse is one of the few verses which has no enjambement. Most of the sonnet, as you might have seen, there are many enjambements, there are many breakdowns of the sentences of the verses. The verses are broken down, whilst here, this verse is one of the few verses which is not interrupted. But why? We have the verb to perceive, which is an illusion. If we go into a deeper sense, the fact that we have no enjambement here in the verse I perceive the red blotched planets is the fact that it is an illusionary harmony. the enjambment tends to break this, whilst when we have the fluency of the verse is something harmonious, but this harmony is apparent. And there we have the verb to perceive, I perceive the red blotched planets. Is this out of the stage? Is this out of that stage? Here it is more evident the alliteration of these dental consonants, of these T sounds. The sense is always the same, to underline the torment, the disturb that he has, that Macdonne has. And is this out of that stage? In the same verse, we have the use of the pronoun this and that. Just a way of saying that it doesn't know what the reality is, if it is in this word or in that word. And the use of stage is referred to this on the seventh scene of the second act of As You Like It of Shakespeare, where he says all the world is a stage and all the men and women merely players. Indeed, the world is conceived as a stage. Ancefole, the unsown desire, root. Why unsown desire? I mean, we have another oxymoron, as it was for the pleasant sorrow, or as it was for the disturbing quietness. Even this use of oxymoron are predominant in this sonnet. But unsown desire is, in my opinion, is probably more powerful compared to the previous oxymoron which were used, since desire from Latin means desire, the tension, saya, which comes from Latin sidera, stars, and desire means tension towards the stars. But unsown desire, unsown, this idea of being attached to the ground, doesn't allow in this case Macdonne to go to the stars. Unsown desire, a desire which will never be accomplished and wrote. This was all in all the prologue, the first part, the opening part of the tragedy of Macdonne. Well, if you have doubts, if you want to know something else about this, tell me and I'll tell you, but this was just a sort of insight into the prologue and into the tragedy that I've been working on and that I've been into for much time. I hope you enjoyed it, and well, see you soon.